My name is Beverly Weber. I'm the President and CEO of the United Way of Benton and Franklin Counties, and it's my privilege to welcome you to our second annual Community Health and Human Services Forum. We know that this is going to be a very educational event, and I think that you're really going to come away with a new appreciation for what's happening in our community. But before we begin, I want to take just a brief moment to explain why we are having this forum. About 8 years ago, United Way was asked by community leaders to engage our community in identifying and prioritizing the most pressing problems in our community. And those problems ended up being in four broad categories: education, health, safety, and self-sufficiency. And they also asked us to work to try to address those issues by bringing the community together to tackle them in a more collaborative way. The final thing they asked of us was that we report back to the community on how we're doing as a community in moving the needle down on those issues. And that's exactly what we're doing today. We're bringing together a panel of experts who are going to provide you with up-to-date information about what's happening, trends that you can expect, and as well as a look back and what's happened in the future. And so with that in mind, I'd like to call on our moderator for this event this morning, Loanne Ayers. She's Director of Strategic Partnerships at WSU Tri-Cities.
Good morning, everyone. Yay, you are awake. Excellent. Well, I am really pleased to see all of you braving the cold initial winter in the Tri-Cities to devote some time to learn more about what's happening in our community, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what are organizations and individuals doing about those, and what are some of the things that are just in the future that we can do to make our community an even better place to live and work. Today is really about getting information, making connections to look at the quality of life that we Tri-Citians so tout as being fantastic, and also the quality of our workforce. What impacts our workforce, and how can we continue to keep this a great place to live and grow and thrive? We have some expertise that will be delivering fast-paced information to you. We've provided an opportunity for you in your program to take notes. Don't worry about copying detailed information, because when you came in, you should have each received this great USB. Now, some people might have say, is this real? This is a very large USB. No, if you grasp the card by where the lanyard is attached and you just twist, that is the USB. Okay? And then so you just slide it in to your computer or your mobile device, and you will have all of the PowerPoints as well as the enriched materials. So some of the presenters provide web links, additional data, other resources that are all on the USB. So again, you just grasp it by where the lanyard is and it swivels, and then that is what you would then be able to download information. Also, you have a QR code in your program, and so if you want to have on your mobile device the PowerPoint presentations that we're going through today closer to your eyes, you can do that by just scanning the QR code in your program, and then you will have access to that PowerPoint as well. We have the opportunity for you to submit questions, and there are a couple of ways that you can do that. So as you are hearing presentations, we won't have interaction right away. We will hold those questions until the end, because our experience has been that sometimes the questions cover multiple areas, and so that gives us a chance to be able to really effectively and efficiently answer the questions that arise. You have little green cards on your table. Feel free to pick those up and write in questions. You could just send them to the ends of the aisles, and we'll have people floating around to pick them up. So as we see green cards go to the ends, feel free to write them on questions on the green cards and then send them to the end. You can also text us your questions. So in front of you or nearby you is a little card, and it says, do you have a question? So you can text them to us, and those will be received by United Way staff in the back, and that way again we'll have another opportunity for those of you who are better at keyboarding or your thumbs work better than writing. We can take your questions in that way as well. I want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. We really appreciate the support of Charter. Charter Communications is taping this. You'll be able to view that on channel number 190. And then there'll also be on the United Way a link to some YouTubes that will be organized by panel. So if you want to get information or refresh information, maybe you're working with your faith-based group or a not-for-profit or a social service agency and you want their board to just see a snippet from this presentation, you can go directly to the YouTube and get either the education, health, safety, or self-sufficiency panels. So that gives you another way to access information afterwards. And again, that's thank you to Charter for making that possible. AmeriGroup is also one of our premier sponsors, and they've provided some additional information on the back table. So some tip sheets that might be helpful for you or your clients or people you work with. So during the break, feel free to go back to the back table. Uprising is also one of our presenters, and they provided some information. So there are some handouts connected to the presentations that we are doing today, as well as some great tip sheets from AmeriGroup in the back. And then finally, thanks to Lourdes Health Network for their sponsorship. Lourdes is invested in this community, and they're investing in by helping to support this event. So before we begin, I just want to remind you that if you would please silence your mobile devices. It is a large room, but this is being taped, and we don't want you to be outstanding and distract from our presenters. So if you would please get out your mobile devices and silence them, that will help us with the flow of questions. We are going to be going through this very fast, so I'll be introducing a panel. We won't be going through their bios. You can get that information in the program, as well as contact information is available. So if you have a question that arises that you don't want to ask here, or maybe you want to invite them to be a guest speaker at your Kiwanis or Rotary group, you have contact information for all of our panelists in your program, and feel free to do that. We're going to be starting with something near and dear to my heart, of course, and that's education. And we're going to be hearing from two excellent speakers about the challenges and opportunities in our community related to education. First, we have Carla Prock. Carla is the Preventative Health Services Supervisor with Benton Franklin Health District, and she has worked in public health in Benton Franklin Health District for 14 years. She is an RN and a public health nurse, and is a Coug. So thank you, Carla. She is the chairperson of the Benton Franklin Early Learning Alliance. Following Carla will be Bruce Hawkins. Bruce is the superintendent of Educational Service District 123, which covers the school districts in our region. He has been there for 11 years and has a significant experience in education. First, let's welcome Carla to the platform. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. So I am a public health nurse, and I think one of the first questions is, why is she speaking in the education section? And I think it's important to realize that when we look at early learning encompasses everything from prenatal care through our entry into kindergarten. So when we know that children are healthy and better prepared to learn for school, they're more successful in school. And when they're more successful in school, they're more likely to complete school and move on to higher education. And when our adults are better educated, they're much more likely to have decreased mental and physical health problems that lead to chronic disease and chronic illness. So you can see that it's very linked to healthcare. A few years ago, Washington State established a cabinet-level department whose sole focus was early learning. And in 2010, the Department of Early Learning completed a comprehensive early learning plan. Dell has succeeded in building public and private partnerships, working with Thrive by 5 of Washington, and they've achieved obtaining multiple successful federal grants as well as private funding to work towards these goals. So you can see in Washington, we work together so that all children start life with a solid foundation for success based on strong families and a world-class early learning system for all children prenatal through 3rd grade. Part of the early learning system plan is to establish a comprehensive early learning system that brings together all parties who have a vested interest in children and families. And you can see here what I was speaking of before, that it really starts with prenatal care. Of course, we include childcare and preschool, kindergarten through 3rd grade, early education, health and nutrition, social, emotional development and mental health, And you'll hear from kindergarten teachers that's one of their highest areas of need. Parent and community partnerships, parenting education and resources, higher education and child development and early learning education, and then of course we need professional development for those quality early learning professionals. Why do we need to focus on early childhood to begin with? And I think this slide, shows you, this is data from UNICEF, and it shows you that when we measure it across multiple dimensions, the well-being of children in the United States ranks 26th out of 29 rich nations. That's a pretty scary statistic. In order to figure out why this is, we need to address what's causing this pile-up of advantage for some and a cascade of risk for others throughout their life course. This graph shows us the trajectory of a child's life for the first 5 years based on risk factors and protective factors. The life course development concept extends far beyond age 5. It's through death, actually. And it's important to understand that risk factors can be modified by protective factors, and this keeps us on a trajectory for a healthy life. This is a concept that we call resilience. What are risk factors in early childhood? There are many risk factors that can impact our life course trajectory, and you see several of them outlined here with our little baby. And if you look at them, you'll see that most of these risk factors can be linked with the categories of poverty, household dysfunction, and abuse and neglect. But we also have the protective factors. And research supports the common sense notion that when these protective factors are well established in a family unit, the likelihood of child abuse and neglect diminishes. So protective factors are things like parental engagement, strong family bonds, safe and stable and nurturing environments, clear expectations and consequences, academic success, access to health care, strong bonds with pro-social institutions, and again, quality early learning environments. And next, I'd like to leave you with 5 numbers to remember about early childhood development from the Centers of the Developing Child at Harvard University. So our first number is 700. The early years matter because in the first few years of life, 700 new neural connections are formed every second. Neural connections are formed through interaction of genes and a baby's environment and experiences, especially a serve and return or back and forth interaction with trusted adults in their lives. These are the connections that build the brain architecture, which is the foundation upon which all later learning, behavior, and health depend. The next number is 18. And although it's not my favorite use of descriptive terms, this graph shows that early experiences and environments in which children develop in their earliest years can have lasting impacts on later successes in school and life. Barriers to a child's educational achievement start early and they continue to grow with no intervention. Differences in the size of a child's vocabulary first appear at 18 months of age, based on whether they are born into a family with a high or low education or income. By age 3, children with college-educated parents or primary caregivers have vocabularies 2 to 3 times larger than those whose parents had not completed high school. And by the time these children reach school, they're already significantly behind their peers. Those of you who heard me speak before know that I could talk about the impacts of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, all day, so I'll try to limit it to just a few slides. This number, 90 to 100, shows us that significant adversity impairs development in the first 3 years of life. And the more adversity a child faces, the greater odds of a developmental delay. So indeed, risk factors such as poverty, caregiver mental illness, child maltreatment, single-parent households, and low education from the parents have a cumulative impact. In this study, maltreated children exposed to as many as 6 additional risk factors face a 90 to 100% likelihood of having 1 or more developmental delays in their cognitive, language, or emotional sectors. 3 to 1. The point to remember here is that early experiences actually get into the body. They have lifelong effects, not just on cognitive and emotional development, but on long-term physical health as well, which is back to why healthcare professionals should be concerned with early learning. A growing body of evidence now links significant adversity in childhood to increased risks of a range of health problems as an adult, including diabetes, hypertension, stroke, obesity, and many forms of cancer. This graph shows that adults who recall having 7 to 8 serious adverse experiences in childhood are 3 times more likely to have cardiovascular diseases in adults and children between birth and 3 years old are the most likely age group to experience some form of maltreatment. 4 to 9. Providing young children with a healthy environment in which to learn and grow is not only good for their development, economists have also shown that high-quality early learning programs bring impressive returns to the investment of the public. 3 of the most rigorous long-term studies found a range of returns between $4 and $9 for every dollar invested in early learning programs for low-income children. Participants from these programs who were followed into adulthood showed increased earnings, while the public saw returns in the form of reduced special education costs, welfare costs, and crime costs, and increased tax revenues from program participants later in their lives. You can see here in our community, we do have nurse-family partnership, which is identified there in the middle of the graph. When we think of children, we know that a child is its own person with its own biology and genetics and personality. But that child is nested in a family with peers and close social relationships, which is then nested in their schools and community institutions, churches, neighborhoods, which are then nested in our culture with laws and policies and social structures and systems. All of these things impact a child's potential success. So what it tells us is getting things right the first time is easier and more effective than trying to fix them later. Early childhood matters because experiences early in life have a lasting impact on later learning and behavior and health. Highly specialized interventions are needed as early as possible for children experiencing toxic stress. Early life experiences actually get under your skin and into your body with lifelong effects on adult physical and mental health. And all society benefits from investments in early learning programs. So what are we doing locally? The Benton Franklin Early Learning Alliance developed from a very dedicated group of early learning professionals who'd meet for brown bag lunches. The alliance is now an official alliance with governing documents and membership requirements. And these are some of our current organizational members, as well as there are many individual members and informed members. We are working closely with the Southeastern Washington Regional Early Learning Coalition to make sure all of our efforts are aligned. This brings us back to the early learning plan I referenced earlier. The Early Learning Alliance locally has aligned the direction of our coalition closely with these Washington State Early Learning Plan indicators. Each indicator is based on a subject matter area in the Kids Matters framework: child and health development, early care and education, family and community partnerships, and social, emotional, and mental health. There's many examples of local programs and initiatives that closely align with the indicators. For example, these are several local initiatives that align with our initiatives for ready and successful children, parents, families, and caregivers. Universal developmental screening programs to identify children early for services, ECAP expansion and Head Start and Early Head Start for quality early learning programs, ABCD oral health programs and local WIC programs, Our Babies Can't Wait, Mid-Columbia Library events that do outreach to the community, Love, Talk, Play initiatives for parental engagement, nurse-family partnership, and medical home promotion. Ready and successful early learning professionals in schools. These are some local initiatives, and they're statewide initiatives too, so I'll explain what they are. Early Achievers is Washington's quality rating and improvement system, and it's voluntary for licensed childcare providers, and it helps early learning programs offer high-quality care. The Dell Infant Toddler Initiative, which provides high-quality multidisciplinary consultation to help improve licensed child care quality. We have conference planning partners and partners for early learning that work together on shared educational and professional development for child cares, preschool providers, and kindergarten teachers to help ensure everyone is working with children are on the same page. And WaKids has started and is expanding to many area schools. WaKids, or the Washington Inventory of Developing Skills, is a transition process that ensures a successful start to the K-12 experience, and it includes 3 components: family connection, whole child assessment, and early learning collaboration. And I'd like to leave you with my favorite quote: "It's easier to build strong children than repair broken men." Thank you very much. And the next speaker for our section is Bruce Hawkins from the ESD 123.
I'm going to ask you to join me as a tourist on a journey to become more aware of this view and refer to the days of high standards. And for those of you that are preparing for the holidays, this is a wonderful topic. When those conversations lull, the football games get really bad, you can kick this one off and you're good for about 2 hours. So back in the days of high standards, people went to schools like this. You will recognize this if you've been to many of the cities here in Eastern Washington. They all had one about like this. I think they had the same basic floor plan. This one was constructed in 1913. It was a paragon of modern facilities. Unless you think that in those days that facilities last forever, this replaced a school of only 30 years of age. It was a K through 12 school, and it had some unique features. One of them was a oil-fired furnace system that prepared steam that would keep you comfortable to about 20 degrees. Below 20 degrees, which in Waterville, Washington is every winter, it wasn't so comfortable. And while today, 1 student in 8 has identified disability that requires some kind of accommodation, to my knowledge, only 1 in 300 in this school received any kind of accommodation, and that was done at another school system about 45 minutes away, back in the days of high standard. My friend Richard contacted polio as a young man and had very limited use of one leg. His ability to reach the high school, which was on the highest floor, was to have 2 strapping football players pick him up and tote him up there, and then he could hop his way down to the other classrooms. So, no second language learners back in the day of high standards, very little poverty, no kindergarten, no preschool, no homeless youth, but we had a lot of corporal punishment. So that was the days of high standards. Now, lest you think that I'm being sarcastic, there were some things that were very good, and many of us who attended school in those days have much to celebrate in terms of our life. But what I want to do next with this slide is talk about how things were different. The gentleman to the far right is 14 and a half years of age. You can tell by his pants he's anticipating very high water marks. 14 and a half. The fellow in the middle at 14 and a half, the year was 1942. We were 6 months into a world war. And most of his high school was spent at home because his dad was ill and they had to keep the farm going. The fellow to the far left, when he was 14 and a half years old, he was on a destroyer in the U.S. Navy, and it had been 6 months since the World War I had started. My point is that conditions have changed. So when we think back to the days of high standards, things are different. The picture was taken in 1965. Since 1965, many of you are too young to even have a glimpse of this time. But the Beatles were right in their heyday. President was Lyndon B. Johnson. 1 year after he had signed the Bill for Civil Rights, Sandy Koufax was considered the finest pitcher in baseball. The Dodgers had moved from Brooklyn out to L.A. But the Athletics were still in Kansas City, and a fellow 60 years old by the name of Satchel Paige pitched 3 scoreless innings. Can you imagine that today? Now, what's interesting is in 1965, why was he pitching at 60 years of age? Because the color barrier had existed. He was not allowed to pitch during his prime. Many believe that he was the greatest pitcher that ever pitched the game. That was different as well. So back to this picture, and I understand that 7 people do not make an accurate sample size for those of you that are researchers. You're saying, well, holy smokes, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I want to tell you a little bit about my family. This was a Boy Scout award ceremony of some type. As I mentioned, it was in September of 1965. And let's examine the education levels. Now, I want to be very careful to stipulate that we're talking formal education. Formal education. These are years in school. My grandfather to the left, born right at 1900. We don't know how many years of education he had. He was in rural Pennsylvania. They had itinerant teachers. He went to some Catholic schools. We guess maybe a couple years. He could read a little bit and write his name. My grandmother was from West Virginia, And she was considered a very educated woman. She had 3 years of formal education. My granny could write beautifully, but she also was a fabulous cook. And so when I talk about formal education, one of the things we have to realize is that the family kicked in at about that time, and then they learned other skills in their family, as did my granddad. He was prepared to be a coal miner, and thus the reason for him joining the Navy. We have my brother, my sister, and my dad's arm. My dad he graduated high school, but attended very little high school because of the situation on the farm. My mother got to go to a year of college. The 3 kids, we average about 5 years of college each. So from, let's say, grade 3 formal education to 5 years of college, that is a span of about 56 years. My point is, this is a wonderful exercise for a family. Take a look at your family and look at what has happened and the expectation for education. So back in the days of high standards, by the way, at 8th grade in the state of Washington, you had completed your compulsory education. You were done. High school was an extra. You didn't have to attend if you didn't want to, and most of the people I know did. However, it's good to note that in that time period, the amount of expectation for education had jumped by 5-fold. And again, I ask you to check out your family. Gentleman in the picture is Sir Ken Robinson. If you want a treat, preparing for those holidays now, go on YouTube, Google Sir Ken Robinson, and he has wonderful talks. He's kind of the star of the TED Talks, and he's got this wonderful British accent. He's obviously noted by the Queen because he's a Sir. But he asks an interesting question. What will the students in today's kindergarten need in terms of education, formal and otherwise, for them to retire at 2074? Now, most of us think in terms of 10 years, 2074. And what will the role of schools be? But the third one I'd really like you to think about, I think we have become a nation that it looks to the national leaders and politics and state to solve these issues for us. And frankly, that hasn't worked too well for us. No Child Left Behind, the Race to the Top, those have not produced what we want. And so Sir Ken Robinson would say it's a grassroots effort. It happens with people like you, and it happens community to community. 2074. This is Dave Bond, last year spoke at the podium. And in fact, in 1900, our graduation rate, we're going to switch over to high school graduation, was at 8.8%. Keep in mind, though, like my grandmother, many of them did not even reach junior high school. 8.8%. In 1940, this is my father's group, 51%, but when my father graduated in 1946, because of the war, the actual graduation rate had dropped to 46%, because a lot of fellows were not finishing their education. It peaked at 1969, the year I graduated, at 80%, back in the days of high standards. We had 80% of our folks graduate. 2014, we had a dip. We're back up to 80%. Johns Hopkins University has done studies that predict that by the year 2020, high school graduation will be at 90%, 9 in 10. However, that may not be enough. High school graduation has a huge effect on the lives of people. 7 times higher to not graduate are those that come from low-income families. We can predict dropouts in some schools as early as 1st grade, and certainly by 3rd grade in some cases. Here are the ones that scare me. Incarceration, 63 times the level of those that graduate from high school. And the last 2 literally indicate a life or death matter. Over 10 years for females that don't graduate, shorter lifespan, and 13 for males. And so for folks that say that high school graduation doesn't matter, it matters to them. Then we've got this business of higher ed, and we're not going to have somebody at the podium to talk about that, but as a matter of fact, higher ed is more expensive than back in the days of high standards. I can assure you that. This was in the paper. If you cannot read this, high school student secures a college loan for $80,000 at 8% interest, assuming the economy is still in a tank after graduation, that only low-paying service sector jobs are available, and factoring for inflation, can the loan be repaid before the student dies of old age? Show your work. And then his comment is, these new SAT questions are a little too relevant. We do need to do something about the affordability of higher ed, and we need to face the fact, even looking at my family photo taken in 1965, people need higher ed. Dr. Cummins last year talked about the fact that higher ed, in terms of times when times are tough, that you recover much more quickly, and that the job opportunities are greater. And this is another cynical one that I laughed at. But a commencement speaker saying, if I can offer one piece of advice for the class of 2014, it's this. Some throw pillows, a few scented candles can really liven up that apartment in your parents' basement. This is another notion that, while it's fun to look at, the facts are that as we look to that group that are going to be retiring in 2074, they're going to need higher education, and we need to prepare them for that. So back to Sir Ken Robertson. It should be Robinson. He talks about the fact that education is more than just the economic part, which we seem to focus on. And as my predecessor pointed out, it is a cultural thing. We preserve our culture, we preserve our way of life through education. It's about social, but it's really the last item too. It's personal. And education makes us and helps us to be who we are. And it helps us to compete when many of the indicators across nations indicate that there's flaws in our education system, and yet we still have the greatest number of patents. We still have some of the greatest discoveries in the world. If you want to Google Sir Ken, how to change education from the ground up is a good one to start with. I urge you to take a look at that. So, as we look to the future, 2074, what is it going to take? All students are going to need early learning options, not just those that can afford it, and not just those that can qualify because of poverty. All students will need to have full-day kindergarten. We're making progress. We're not there yet. And I'm so proud of United Way for taking on Attendance Matters, because we need to get kids into school more. That program focuses on middle-level students. The aim is to take 11,000 middle school students and have them attend 2 more days per year of school. When that's all settled and done, that's 140,000 hours of instruction. And other than the good people who have given us resources to connect to this enterprise, it's not a government program. It's not costing you taxpayer dollars. This is something that we can do, and it's something you can get behind as well. After-school programming is going to be important as we look at the opportunity to increase the formal education. All students need to graduate high school. Absolutely all students, and we've presented the evidence. And then the extended learning options. And I liken this to the kinds of things that happened back in the days of high standards. And not as many kids are involved with Scouts, not as many kids are involved with other things. We look at the education system as a way to maybe help in that, and you can help that too. It's an opportunity for you to get on board. Thank you very much.